With the new TV show hitting Peacock later this month, Sony is ready to remind gamers of Twisted Metal's greatness by releasing two of the long-running franchise's best games on the PlayStation Plus service. That's right, starting today, PS Plus Premium subscribers will be able to access both Twisted Metal and Twisted Metal 2. That's great timing, but the question still remains. Are either of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Hyper, Next Generation, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. So go and reinforce the frame of your car because we're about to smash up the competition in this episode of PS Plus Review Crew. The original Twisted Metal was the right game at the absolute right time. It was a first-generation PlayStation game that gave gamers a small taste of a Doom-style deathmatch, all while controlling more like a traditional racing game. This was a big deal for consoles, as it would be another 2 years before first-person shooters truly made their mark on game systems, thanks to the release of GoldenEye 007. Twisted Metal was one of the first real showpiece games for the brand new PlayStation, giving gamers a taste of 3D environments that were full of colorful characters and secrets to find. It was the type of experience that you simply couldn't get on the Saturn, or really any other system, and the critics were ready to fall in love. That certainly describes Electronic Gaming Monthly, who not only gave the game a staggering 9.25 out of 10, but also named it the best game of 1995. SushiX raved about the game and its mindless death and destruction. It's a perfect game to relieve frustration while blasting away computer enemies or your friend in two-player mode. The different endings for each character offer nearly unlimited replayability for this already great title. Mark agreed, though praised a slightly different part of the game. With all the new technology available to programmers, a lot of games are becoming so high-tech that the most important function of the game can be lost: the fun! Twisted Metal seems to only have one job, and it does it well. The game is a blast to play. Believe it or not, EGM gave Twisted Metal the highest score of any magazine at the time. It's worth noting that Die Hard Game Fan did come close, giving it an average 91%. The next highest went to Australian publication Hyper, who gave it an 88% and praised the game's handling and long-term fun. They concluded when my mum said, "Son, here are the keys, keep your eyes on the road because there are lunatics everywhere." She didn't know how right she was. The future looks pretty grim indeed, and you better be damn good on the gas, and even better on the rubber. The low to mid-80s is where you find the rest of the scores. Game Informer gave it an 8.5 out of 10, Computer and Video Games went a little lower with an 81%, and you saw Game Pro settle with a 4 out of 5. That's the same score Twisted Metal received from Next Generation, who lowered their score because the damn thing is too short. If you have any skill at all, you can get all the way to the final stage in about 2 hours. Granted, the final boss is all but impossible to defeat, but by then you'll have seen everything the game has to offer. However, in the end, the short running time is nearly redeemed by an excellent split-screen two-player mode, resulting in one-on-one combat that never gets old. And look, in the end, this is the reason that people are still talking about Twisted Metal all these years later. Sure, the game is fun on its own, but it's a whole new experience when you're going up against your friends. Released 1 year after the smash hit original, Twisted Metal 2 delivers more of what you want. More characters, more locations, and more crazy endings. This time around, we take a tour across the world, blowing up some of the most iconic landmarks. I'm talking about New York City, Moscow, Hong Kong, Antarctica, and of course, Paris and its destructible Eiffel Tower. Much like the original game, Twisted Metal 2 continues to benefit from the lack of any real deathmatch competition on consoles, and the developers at Single Track were ready to take full advantage of this. Does that mean that the game is actually better than the original? Well, the answer to that question depends entirely on what magazine you were reading at the time. If you were to ask Electronic Gaming Monthly, they would have said no. The magazine gave Twisted Metal 2 a score of 8.25 out of 10, down a full point from the original. However, they did have a reason, and it has to do with the new critics that they brought on between the release of the first game and the second. Crispin, for example, started off his review by saying that he didn't actually like EGM's favorite game of 1995. I wasn't all that crazy about the first Twisted Metal, but this sequel is worlds better, even though it looks like the same old thing at first glance. He was especially impressed that you could run over mimes in Paris. Dan also acknowledged the new blood at EGM. I know a lot of people weren't wild about the mindless ride that Twisted Metal was, but how can you not enjoy blowing other cars up? I loved Twisted Metal, and I love Twisted Metal 2 just as much. Give us a better looking game for Part 3. Now, EGM wasn't alone in giving it a slightly lower score, as Edge could only muster up a 7 out of 10 when they reviewed it in issue 41. Fellow UK mag Computer and Video Games went even lower, giving it a 3 out of 5 and then mocking Americans for liking it so much. Strangely enough, this is one of the most popular games in America at the moment. Without being too offensive, it's possible to see why, as this is exactly what we've come to expect from American developers. Rockin' music, wacky characters, explosions, and mindless destruction. While it's fun for a while, like the first game, it isn't gonna last very long at all, even in multiplayer mode. You know what? This is the second Review Crew episode in a row where CVG takes a shot at Americans, and I'm starting to take it personally. Thankfully, there were some magazines that actually liked the game more than the 1995 original. For example, you saw Game Informer give the game an 8.75 out of 10. GamePro went even higher, giving Twisted Metal 2 its first and only perfect score. They concluded that the one-player mode is plenty enthralling, but the two-player split-screen head-to-head action is where the game really shines, providing hours of thumb-blistering fender-bender action. If you've played the first Twisted Metal and wanted a little more bang for your buck, then this is the game for you. Look, if you're only going to play one, then I'd say go with Twisted Metal 2. But the truth is, you're going to have a great time no matter which game you pick.
Style, sophistication, the ability to launch napalm into oncoming traffic. If these are the things you look for in an automobile, it's time you test drive Twisted Metal 2. Fully automated weaponry, dual rocket launchers, and the new APS flamethrowing system. All standard. Drive the 1997 Twisted Metal 2 on PlayStation from Sony, and let style be your weapon.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these Twisted Metal reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes every single time Nintendo, Sony, or really any other company adds a classic game to their service. We have a whole Review Crew playlist featuring dozens of episodes. Give it a watch. Now, here's the question I have for you. Should Sony resurrect Twisted Metal? Look, it's been over a decade since we've had a new Twisted Metal game, and I feel like we're really missing out. Just imagine a huge destructible island with 50 or maybe 100 cars, destruction everywhere, massive explosions in the background, missiles raining down on everybody. The chaos. Honestly, the time is now to really show off what the technology can do for Twisted Metal. Or, you could just turn it into a sitcom on Peacock. I guess you could do that. Anyway, let me see your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with more stuff. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.